In this presentation, I am going to explain the difference between writing a summary versus writing a paraphrase. And so we're going to, there's some misconception about the two. Some people tend to think that a summary and a paraphrase mean the same thing. So some of you may have heard your teacher say, oh, write a summary, and you may have heard your teacher say, paraphrase this. And to some of you, they sound like they are synonymous. But the truth is that they are similar in some way. However, they are also different. And so for this assignment and this lecture, it's important to know the differences because on your test, I will ask you to write both a summary and a paraphrase, and I will be looking for very specific things for each one of them. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a summary and a paraphrase similar, what makes them alike, okay? So when you write a summary and a paraphrase, you do always use your own words. So that means that you don't want to write exactly as the author writes. Don't use the author's vocabulary. Try to explain what the author is saying the way you understand it with your own words. When you write a summary or a paraphrase and you use your own words, don't feel pressure to try to use fancy vocabulary or fancy sentence structures. Use simple language, your everyday language that you use when you write a summary and a paraphrase, okay? Another thing that makes the summary and a paraphrase alike or the same is when you write a summary and a paraphrase, you want to make sure that your interpretation of the text, your interpretation of whatever you're summarizing or paraphrasing, it has to mean the same as what the author intended, okay? So when you write a summary and a paraphrase, you are not writing down what your opinion is, okay? You are writing simply exactly what the author is trying to say. So that's really important when you're doing both. So really, these are the only two things that make a summary and a paraphrase the same. So let's look at what makes them different. So when you write a summary is always shorter than the original text, okay? However, for a paraphrase can be longer or shorter than the original text. So it's interesting that a paraphrase can be longer because when you paraphrase, you might explain something and you might be more wordy in the way you explain it. In a summary, the whole purpose of a summary is to shorten or to write something, your understanding of a text that you've read, and you write it in a short, concise manner. So a paraphrase can be longer or shorter, and a summary is typically and always shorter. Another thing that makes a summary and a paraphrase different is that a summary includes only the main ideas. So that means a paraphrase includes the main idea and the supporting detail. So when you summarize, you only summarize the main idea of the text or of the section. When you paraphrase, you include everything, the main idea and the supporting details. This is one of the characteristics of summary and a paraphrase that sets them apart, okay? So it's really, really important you understand what it means to include only the main ideas and what it means to include the main idea and the supporting details. A summary typically covers a large section of a text. So if you were asked to write a summary, you would summarize like maybe a few pages together, or maybe you might summarize a whole chapter, or maybe you might summarize just a section, but it's typically a long, larger section. However, when you paraphrase covers a small section of the text. Typically, when you're asked to paraphrase, you are asked to paraphrase just a paragraph or maybe a couple of paragraphs. You would never be asked to paraphrase like a whole chapter, or you would never be asked to paraphrase like a couple of pages. That would take you really, really long because remember, a paraphrase includes the main idea and the supporting detail. So these are some of the things that make a summary and a paraphrase alike and how they are both different. Now, in this lecture, we're going to focus just on how to write a summary, okay? And so again, as a review, when you write a summary, you use your own words. Your interpretation of the text must be the same as what the author intended. Your summary should always be shorter than the original text. Your summary includes only the main ideas. And then finally, your summary typically covers a large section of the text, usually a few pages, maybe a chapter, or a very long section. So I used the outline that we did from Unit 1 from the article Elements of Culture, and I provided the article and the full outline in Canvas. So if you would like to have those available so you can follow along and see the big picture, feel free to stop the video and do that. I think that would help you see the big picture of how I'm trying to break up the outline to write the summary, okay? So on our outline, we had several sections and we labeled them Roman numeral 1. And if you remember when we did this assignment, we labeled each paragraph A, B, C, D, E, F, G for the main heading, values, and beliefs. And to complete the outline, you had to identify the main idea for each paragraph. So under values and beliefs, these were the main ideas for each of the paragraphs under values and beliefs. Now, to write a summary, because you have created your outline already, it's going to be very easy to write your summary, okay? Basically, you're going to take all of these main ideas and you are going to write a paragraph to summarize the whole entire section on values and beliefs. So what I'm doing is I'm going to break it up to you paragraph by paragraph and show you how I move from the outline to the summary. And then I'll show you how it looks like in a paragraph format. And I'll do another section for you so you'll see it again. Remember, when we write a summary has to be in my own words as the writer. So my first main idea is values and beliefs are the most important elements of culture. And so when I put that into my own words in my summary, I wrote down, when it comes to one's culture, values and beliefs are critical factors. Now for B and C, I decided in my summary that this works best to combine both main ideas together into a sentence. So for B, values help shape a society. C, living up to a culture's value can be difficult. I combined both of these main ideas, and in my summary, I wrote, while values contribute to the formation of how a society functions, it can be challenging to adhere to them. So I broke it up. It's really one sentence, but I wanted you to see how B correlates with values help shape a society, and in the summary and how I wrote it in my own words, I just said while values contribute the formation of how a society functions, the C says living up to a culture's value can be difficult. I just put in my own words and said it can be challenging to adhere them. They both mean the same thing, but I just put it in my own words. The section on the summary is how I understand what the author is saying. So if we look at D, values portray an ideal culture, but it isn't always that easy. So in the summary, I wrote down in my own words, values also set the standard for what a culture is supposed to be like. However, the reality of a culture is different from the ideal culture. Okay, I was a little bit more wordy in this section here, and that's okay. Societies strive to put values into action through rewards, sanctions, and punishment. I put down rewards, sanctions, and punishments are used to ensure values are enforced in society. Now, notice I use the same words, rewards, sanctions, and punishments, as the outline. When there are very specific vocabulary, you can use those specific vocabulary in your summary, okay? For F, when people go against the society's value, they are punished. So you'll see here, I rewrote this in the summary. It says, so when people do not follow the rules established by the values of the society, these individuals must face the consequences. They're both saying the same thing. I'm just saying it, putting it in my own words. And then finally, G, values also vary from culture to culture. I put my summary is, at the end of the day, values from one culture to another culture can be very different. Now, all I did was I took my outline and I broke it up to show you how I rewrote each of the sentence in my own words. But of course, a summary is always a paragraph format. And so in the next slide here, you'll see that this is the format of a summary for the same section. All I did was I copied and pasted those sentences and I put it into a paragraph format. So if your assignment was to summarize the section on values and beliefs, that page, it was almost a whole page long, okay? But my summary is only a paragraph. So basically, I combined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I combined 7 paragraphs into 7 to 8 paragraphs into about 7 sentences, okay? So my summary now reads as a paragraph, and it says, when it comes to one's culture, values and beliefs are critical factors. While values contribute the formation of how a society functions, it can be challenging to adhere to them. Values also set the standard for what a culture is supposed to be like. However, the reality of a culture is different from the ideal culture. Rewards, sanctions, and punishments are used to ensure values are enforced in society. So when people do not follow the rules established by the values of a society, these individuals must face the consequences. At the end of the day, values from one culture to another culture can be very different. And this right here is a summary, okay? Now, let's try one more. So this is section 2, Roman numeral 2 in the article Elements of Culture. And if you remember, Roman numeral 2 were norms. And so in this section, there were 7 paragraphs, okay? And I'm not going to break it up one sentence at a time for you in this slide, but I want you to see that this is how my summary looks like. And I color-coded them so you can sort of see how which sentence matches up with each with the outline. So my summary here, I color-coded my summary, and then you'll notice there are some sentences that are italicized and bolded in my summary. These sentences do not match any of the main ideas on the outline. However, I added these sentences in here to show you that sometimes in a summary you need sentences to help the flow of the summary and to make sure that your summary is clear, okay? So when you read my summary, you'll see these bolded, italicized sentences as sort of like transitional sentences that connects the ideas together and clarify the ideas of this section in the article, in the text. So when I read the summary, you'll see how these sentences here really helps glue the ideas together. Societies use norms to explain how individuals should act. One type of norm is called formal norms. Formal norms are like rules people must follow, but how much these rules are enforced can differ. There are many examples to show how norms are enforced differently. One example is it is against the law to drink and drive, but drinking is part of the culture. Another type of norm is informal norms. These norms are learned indirectly, and unlike formal norms, they are not official. Norms can also be categorized as mores or folkways. Mores are norms that should not be broken or violated, and when they are, the individual can face great penalties. On the other hand, folkway norms do not have serious consequences. Rather, these norms are informal daily practices based on the culture. Folkways are norms people practice and behave out of habit. Now, so one of the things so let's go back and look at how, if these summaries follow some of the characteristics that I described earlier. I used my own words, so you'll see that I did not use the same words as my outline, okay? My meaning and how I interpreted the text means the same as what the main ideas are in the outline, okay? And so I kept the meaning the same. I didn't interpret it differently where it fit my opinion about the topic. I used my own words, which is very, very important. And then I included all of the main ideas in my summary that I can find in my outline, okay? So it's really important that in your summary, if you have all the main ideas in your summary. So this is just another example of how my summary looks like for the whole section on norms from the article, okay? So again, when you write a summary, so very important, you use your own words. Your interpretation of the text must be the same as what the author intended. Remember that your summary should always be shorter than the original text. Include only the main ideas. Don't go into details. I don't need to know the details. And finally, a summary covers a large section of a text. It's usually a few pages and a chapter or a section. So when you prepare to work on your summary for the article Pursuit of Happiness, come back to look at these characteristics to make sure that you have that you are applying these to your summary.